We are live and recording! Yay! Hello, everyone! Sorry, the technical gods were trying us a little bit today, but we're here. And most importantly, we have our audio so that you can hear our author, Dan Hornsby, yay! Who is going to be in conversation with Jared Bartman. And today we are celebrating, it is always so exciting to celebrate a debut book, and we are celebrating Via Negativa. And I am so excited for y'all to get to hear them talk about it. Now, just to give you a little intro into our authors for today, Dan's stories and essays have appeared in the LA Review of Books, Electric Literature, and I cannot read today. Oh, goodness. The Missouri Review and Joyland. And his debut novel, Via Negativa, is a heartfelt, daring, divinely hilarious debut novel about a homeless priest who embarks on a fateful journey with a pistol in his back pocket and an injured coyote in his back seat. And at the end of the sojourn, he is going to have to decide, is penance better paid with revenge or with redemption? Which you'll have to read the book to figure that part out, won't you? Mm. And then Jared is a musician, writer, graphic designer, and UX designer, though not necessarily in that order. And he leads a band called Moon Ruin, but secretly likes writing fiction more. We won't tell anyone this isn't recorded, nor is it going on the internet. Not at all. And he is working on a novel about DIY touring musicians and spiritual vortexes. Mm-hmm. So you guys are in for a super big treat. Before I pass it off, a little house rules. As y'all know, to the right-hand side, we have our chat section. So hello, Sean and Alice. Thank you for dropping whatever, I don't know what to call this emoji, but hello, reciprocated back. And then, right, it's like the hug / the It's all good. I don't know. And then if you look down below where it says ask a question, that's my favorite feature that Crowdcast has. And that is if you have questions for Dan and Jared, make sure you put them down below. The best part about events is that you get to interact with the authors. You get to pry the mysterious creative brain and be like, now tell me, how did you come up with this story that is awesome, but exactly where did these thoughts come from? So make sure you ask those questions down below. And then lastly, but certainly not least, if you wish to purchase Via Negativa, which I highly encourage you do, there is a purchase book button down below. And make sure you go and give this book lots and lots of love. On that note, I'm going to pass it off to Jared, and I will see y'all at the end of the event. Bye.
All right. That was such a good intro. Hey, dude.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to be doing this with you.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, thank you for asking me. So I've got my hardcover. I don't have the paperback yet, but so I guess I'm gonna ask you some questions that I put together because I've read this book a couple times now, and yeah, I've got some questions still about it, even though you and I have talked quite a bit. And then I'm also going to ask you to read some stuff. So do you have your hardcover copy as well?
I have it on deck. So there you go.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So I guess just kind of to kick it off, for those people who are listening who might not have read the novel yet, can you tell us kind of generally what the book is about?
Yeah. So kind of building off of what Constance laid out, it follows a priest who is retired and kind of living out of his car, and you learn why he's doing that as you read along. But he is someone who has a lot of mystical inclinations, but also a lot of issues with the kind of institutional Catholic Church. He spent most of his kind of like priestly career in Indiana, and he's on a road trip going to kind of see some old parishioners, but also maybe confront someone from his past along the way. And early in the novel, really in the opening beat, he picks up this injured coyote and tries to rehabilitate it. So you see a lot of his life and kind of the things that got him to this weird place where he is now. His like decades long beefs with a bishop and kind of, you know, the push and pull with, you know, a church that kind of oscillates in its conservativeness.
Yeah.
But, you know, he runs into a bunch of weirdos on the road too. And, they kind of seek him out too with his like spiritual expertise. So he has
Mm-hmm.
a lot of weird little brief friendships and relationships too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something I love. It's just sort of like the weirdness, the weirdos, the sacred and the profane all kind of like smashed together. So I guess I want to ask something kind of piggybacking off of that. So the coyote is sort of his companion through quite a bit of the book. And was what was the reason that you chose a coyote to be Father Dan's sort of
Yeah.
companion and animal? And did that have any kind of symbolic resonance to you that you could elaborate on?
Yeah. I think like there are kind of two things really that, like, I don't know, I think keep us reading, but also maybe if you're writing a novel, kind of keep you writing.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing is very technical, like a problem. You know what I mean? Like, oh,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
is the problem? What are they trying to figure out? But the other thing I think for me too, like that's not really enough. And I kind of always want a dream image, something that is compelling and for reasons I don't understand.
Yeah.
And so for me, I kind of wanted someone who was exploring these mystical ideas. But the coyote thing to me was just like this image I could always come back to.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to see that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so like as I was writing, I kind of discovered why and what it would mean. And I think for a big part of it is that coyotes are these like weird in-between animals.
Mm-hmm.
If you do the ancestry.com or 23andMe of any given coyote, you're
Okay.
gonna get a little bit of wolf DNA, some dog DNA, and some coyote DNA. And it
Mm-hmm.
might even be like a third of each. It might not even be mostly coyote, so to speak. So they like
Sure.
break down ideas of speciation.
Okay.
And I think, as kind of little trickster figures.
Yeah. That's a trickster myth. That's a thing like in Native American
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah, and I just
isn't
like
it?
that they're kind of slippery
Yeah.
shapeshifters, and they've adapted to the weird ecological holes that we've left from killing other animals, and so they're
Right.
like they're a kind of little piece of wildness that also fits into the world that we've made.
Yeah.
And I like that they kind of stand on both sides of that a little bit, but also
Yeah.
just more in a plot way. I have this character who's really living in the past and who's really trying to pick apart these things that he regrets. And so like having a road trip and having the coyote in the car, it keeps him in the physical world and kind of keeps him rooted. Like this thing
Gives him
shitting in
something
the
to
back.
do. Yeah.
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 It's shitting and pissing and needs food and
Eating his
needs
books.
yeah, and eating his books and stuff like that, gnawing on
Yeah.
his books. And so it was a way kind of to like, I found mechanically as I was trying to figure it out, as a way to ground him in like the physical world. So he's not just living in the past and living in
Right.
his.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, it's like giving him something to do with his hands in the
Yeah.
photo, kind of.
Totally.
Yeah, and like I don't know, just like, the opening passage of the book, just like the first sentence is so elegant to me. Just somebody hit a coyote and I pulled over to the shoulder to take a look at it. And it's just like grabs you so well.
Jared.
Yeah, man. So I'm going to, I guess, next question then. A lot of this is concerned with Father Dan's friendship with this guy Paul, and like this is very central to the book, this friendship, and like you write really beautifully about their time together and kind of the way that Dan sort of eventually falls out of his life a bit. And like one time you and I spoke about our process, your process of writing this book, and you mentioned that you had chosen the word hiding, like you were kind of trying to get your foot in the door on this book, and you were like chose this theme, and the theme was hiding, and you used that as kind of like a guiding North Star, like as you wrote. And I guess I was just going to ask you, how does Father Dan and his behavior and his relationship with Paul kind of exemplify that word, or like how does that manifest itself?
So the title refers to this kind of loose theological tradition that has its roots really in like the 4th or 5th century. The Via Negativa, the way of denial, or the negative road, which I'm kind of playing with as a road novel.
Right.
And so it means like trying to get at the divine without language, without images necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted a narrator that really grappled with that tradition and thought about it. And I thought that like somebody who was into that might also kind of weaponize it, maybe.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of trauma that's related to the sex abuse crisis in the book.
Right.
And, someone like that, I figure, the fundamental nature of the Catholic Church in the 20th and little in the 21st century too is denial, right? That has to do with this like incredible violence and silence around it. And so I thought it was a way that I could marry those two things. And it seemed like an emotionally real way somebody might navigate both their mystical interest and their disillusionment and that trauma.
Right. Okay.
And so denial kind of became this thing. And it's like, when you think about it, it's like priests really do, and a lot of like kind of like very committed mystical people really do like deny whether it's their sexual existence, right? And the vow of chastity, or poverty. They're supposed to kind of take that vow too.
Right. Yeah.
And, for him, it's like his friend has this trauma and he's kind of cordoned it off. And rather than talking about it, he feels like he can still do it justice by not talking about it, the same way he doesn't really want to talk about what or who God is.
Right. Yeah. He's kind of running away from both things in a way, but it's also kind of central to his belief system also, and just kind of who he is as a person.
Yeah. And it becomes a kind of fetish for him where he can escape accountability.
Right.
And he uses his status as a priest to not ever have to really be there as a friend, right? Because he has this office he can hide behind.
Yeah, and he kind of outlines how he does this over and over again in the book. Like it's his kind of his big thing. He gets close to people, and then as soon as he gets too close, he kind of withdraws.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. I want to ask you to read something. So kind of about priests. You have this great. So I guess it's page 10. It's the start of chapter 2. Kind of that first big
that
paragraph.
Little hovering chunk.
Yep.
Okay. So there are guitar playing priests, and there are pre-Vatican II priests, and there are Eisenhower priests. There are pedophile priests, and there are communist priests. There are pot smoking priests, subcategory of guitar playing priests, and alcoholic priests, functioning, tragic, or that fine balance, Irish. There are gun owning priests, golfing priests, and tennis playing priests. There are gay priests, and there are priests that are much too straight. There are poetry reading priests, and there are Merton-esque meditating priests, categories I might fall under. There are young priests, an increasingly conservative lot, nostalgic for the pre-Vatican II days they've never had to live through. And there are retired priests, a designation that now applies to me. In fact, I might be considered in the category of retired priest given my current peripatetic status. Not a priest without a parish. Not simply a priest without a parish, but a priest without a rectory, an address, or a home. But all priests are supposed to be without homes. I signed up for it. Yeah, so that's kind of his, catalog of American priests, especially, I think.
And reading that actually the first time, that was like really kind of a revelation to me, actually, because like I grew up Catholic and I was like an altar boy and stuff. And then like my wife's family is like really conservative Catholic. And like we're not, but so like the idea, I think my wife and I kind of wandered away from that tradition, but like we had this idea that that's kind of just like, that's what Catholicism is. And then kind of like hearing you describe like all these little subgenres of Catholicism was like kind of mind blowing to me. And like you also talk about, you use the book as like a kind of like a way for you to riff on like discussing these early Christian writers like Bede Origin.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Origin.
Origin. John of the Cross, Dionysius, the Areopagite. I don't. Yeah,
Yeah, Areopagite. Yeah.
Areopagite. There we
I
go.
know, it's a mouthful.
All these guys. So like, there's a lot there. So, but so you have like a pretty long history with Catholicism yourself, and then you have like an MTS from Harvard Divinity School. And did you have like, I guess what I'm driving at is, did you have a sense of this kind of like multiverse of Catholicism from like an early age, or is that something that kind of evolved from your own
Yeah,
journey?
I went to a very conservative Catholic school growing up. We went to mass every day, if you can imagine how terrible that is for a child.
Sounds
And
horrible.
just an
Yeah.
hour of mass every morning where you don't
Yeah.
talk in the dark. And then, but we went to a more liberal, like campus-y Catholic church on the weekends. And so I saw this kind of like weird, at least a little chunk of this cosmology or maybe dichotomy of priests, where like priests playing guitar or priests into art, and then these priests who are like wearing like hyper conservative like priest dress,
Yeah.
and you know, into all the Latin names. I was an altar boy too, into all the
Yeah.
Latin names for all the like priest swag,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
And so some
Yeah.
that were definitely trying to get back to the like Latin thing.
Yeah, people who like hate Vatican II and stuff, and only like the
Yeah.
Latin. Yeah.
And then people who are all about it. And so that kind of created this weird, where I could see like, this isn't really necessarily like, one experience isn't the whole thing.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And then when I was in Boston, you can really see that. You can really see more of the hippie priests than you would ever see in Indiana, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, definitely.
and so that became kind of like and I tried with that paragraph, I tried to like lay in some of the kinds of priests that pop up in the book, like this
Yeah.
abuser that you encounter later, or his
Mhm.
friend, or you know what I mean? So that it's
Yeah.
kind of hints at some of the stuff that you might see later on.
Yeah, I think it's good to like open that up to people who might just like also just have this idea of that tradition as the kind of this monolithic one thing, that there are other people who are kind of like carving out their own versions of truth kind of within that, and like
Yeah.
that's like, all totally applicable to, so that was a big one for me. I think I'm going to ask you to read another thing,
Sure, yeah.
and this kind of goes into um, a bit of like the via negativa stuff. So that's why I wanted to. So
Sure.
I guess it's on page 43 and kind of right where that asterisk starts there with "I passed another billboard of Jesus."
Cool.
And then basically through the end of that chapter, the next page.
I passed another billboard of Jesus just west of St. Louis. A glowing white Jesus, freakishly bleached by the wind and rain. A singer-songwriter Jesus in his white karate robes. A toned, handsome, healthy, muscular, all-American Jesus. Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite says, "We pray that we may come into this darkness which is beyond light, and, without seeing and without knowing, to see and to know that which is above vision and knowledge through the realization that by not seeking and by unknowing we attain true vision and knowledge." John of the Cross. Hence, when the divine light of contemplation strikes a soul not yet entirely illuminated, it causes spiritual darkness. For it not only surpasses the act of natural understanding, but it also deprives the soul of this act and darkens it. Origen said we shouldn't picture God when we pray. In the 4th and 5th centuries, an Egyptian bishop tried to enforce this, and the reaction against him was so strong that he denounced Origen entirely. It's one of the reasons why he's not a saint. Mm-hmm. We call this tradition the via negativa, the negative way, or by way of denial. God in the dark, God in a cloud, God in the corner of your eye. I agree with Origen and everyone else. I hate the billboards. I hate the giant white cross in Effingham. I don't like holy cards all that much. Even crucifixes bother me sometimes. If anything, all my vision seeking has only confirmed the paradox of God hiding perfectly in plain sight. If we want to see God in the world, all we have to do is see the world. If we want to see God in human form, look at people. Look around. Turn around. Bill outlawed, not just the Jesus ones. They block the sky in my view of the trees.
Man, and I would love if I actually heard a priest say that, just because like you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
I have this friend in town here in Memphis, and he's getting really into he's like always wondering if he was, going to become a monk, and he knows so much about theology, and he's been getting into like Greek Orthodox stuff.
Okay.
Like very deep into it, which is like fascinating. And he says, the priests at the Greek Orthodox Church, they're not trying to pitch you anything.
Yeah.
He feels like, some of the Catholic priests are like, okay, well, it's hard to believe, we gotta do it. And like, something about like the priests at the Orthodox Church kind of like, they're like, well, this stuff like has like radiation that will get into you and make you better. And they're not just trying to, and you chant. Right. So it's like, you have to kind of activate it. And there's something kind of cool about that in a way. I know that's, but he's relieved by someone like not trying to sell him something all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just like you just gotta have faith.
Yeah. What is that?
Playing that card.
Old card. Yeah.
Yeah.
That old holy card.
Yeah. And like with the kind of absence, God, in the negative spaces, like you definitely like riff on this in the book too, but just like there's so much like physical shit, like stuff with Catholicism. There's like all the robes and the relics and the stuff and the fancy little things you tie your cassock with and all the gold things you put the host in, and just like nope, just like this guy who's like, I'm not having any of it.
I know.
I like that.
Well, and it's like, when did that stuff come around? I think a lot of people, it's like any conservative movement, people have nostalgia for essentially the recent past. Yeah. They don't really have nostalgia for the deep past.
Right.
So like people want to live in the 19th century, or at least the like first half of the 20th century in conservative Catholicism.
Yeah.
They want to maybe do stuff in Latin, but they're not really down to do stuff in, Greek.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
right. Because these guys you're like referencing are really old, like Origin. They're like the first few centuries or something after Christ, or something like that. So yeah, that's going way back. It's like the original, like I don't know, I guess hipster Christian theology readings, just like yep. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna go on to, let's see, what are we talking about here? I want to talk about Manhattan, Kansas, because I guess not really just about that, but you mention it in the book. And you and I met in Manhattan, Kansas.
We did,
like 10 years ago. And and is that, I want to ask, is that bar that you mentioned in the book, is that a real bar?
It's based mostly off of a real bar called Annie Mae's, where
nice.
So Jared and I met because he was touring with his bandmates and friends, and they were coming in from Illinois and Chicago and stuff. And he played at my house, but your friend that you played with, he has actually played at that bar too. The next time.
Okay.
Gabe. But yeah, it's this basement dive that we used to hang out at all the time.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have a little homage to it. And Kansas is full of these like weird, highway attractions. There's the largest concrete prairie dog in the world. I don't know how large that would have to be. These 2 or 3 headed calves, and there's Coronado's Castle, which makes its way into the book.
Yeah. Yep.
Where outside of Lynchburg, Kansas, they found some chainmail from, I think, the 16th century, and it like there was no way it could have gotten there except by way of Coronado.
Oh,
And
okay.
so they built like a replica of a castle from that time to like, you know,
Whoa.
get some tourist dollars, I suppose.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So
There's like a
Kansas I kind of use that way because it has those kind of like schlocky
yeah.
traps.
Well, and the book, like, I mean, it was really fun for me because like the Manhattan reference, but then it's a road novel and it like reminds me a lot of like being on tour with my band. I don't know,
Yeah.
just like him in the car, there's like a lot of the spirit of being on tour and kind of just like the shittiness of tour. But
Yeah.
also there's like a romantic quality that's really nice. But like also going with talking about the roadside attractions. I love kind of all this like Americana that's kind of entering in the fringes of the narrative, and I guess like the way that you're talking about like these very like weighty concepts and then also kind of like mashing it with this like I don't know, like goofy roadside stuff, and it's just this amazing pop culture stew. And like I'm thinking about how um I don't know, like what's an example? Like the sacred and the profane. There's like the Mary Queen of Snots that like makes its way.
Uh-huh.
It's like the Virgin Mary, and it's like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
bubbling kind of snot thing. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, getting on to what I'm actually going to ask you. How is a touring musician, because you've toured a lot over the years, how has that influenced your writing and vice versa?
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about that is like, I mean, I've been doing a lot of research into the late Middle Ages lately, and it's like those, I don't know, like DIY music stuff is a really good way to like jump into towns and kind of
Mm-hmm.
meet people in this strange way that probably isn't, it's like the closest thing you can probably get to, except from like traveling preacher people, I suppose.
Right.
That kind of weird wandering lifestyle. Like
Yep.
you have a venue you want to go to, there's going to be other bands, you can sort with them a little bit. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And you like, I don't know about you, but like we didn't always like plan exactly where we would stay. You're
Right.
just
Oh,
like, oh, can you see me?
oh, I lost your video. Oh, there you are.
Okay. Yeah. So we'd never exactly have like we never planned that at 100%. So like you're
Mm-hmm.
relying on the kindness of strangers a lot. Uh,
Right.
and there's a lot of improvising and just kind of trusting that this thing is going to work,
Yeah.
and I think,
Literally, like I think the night I think we stayed like 2 nights at the house that you were living at, like
yeah,
the time the when I met. So it was just like, and I don't know how well that was planned in advance.
yeah,
But yeah, anyway, yeah,
yeah. And
totally.
we used to do that all the time. And because we were in Kansas, people would come through and they would sometimes stay like 3 or 4 days because they were going to play somewhere on a Thursday and they played our place on a Monday,
Right.
you know? And
Yep.
it kind of made us a good spot that way. But
Mhm.
all that's to say, I think there's something really cool about like, it's not hard to imagine Jesus like being in a band,
Yeah,
like going
totally.
around. He's in like one of those large bands that was in vogue in the early 2000s. He's in like a polyphonic spree or something. Or
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like that was kind of
Yeah.
hip then to have like
Yeah.
all your friends playing the recorder.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, but it also, I think as a writer, it shows you all these little towns and places and characters in a high intensity way, where you
Mhm.
like meet these little weirdos, and
Yep.
they, it's all fodder, I guess, for what you want to do,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah.
But you have a purpose. You're not just on vacation, and I think there's something really charged about that kind of intense experience.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Um, let's see. Yeah, and I feel like um well, I was going to add something actually. Earlier
Yeah,
today, you and I talked, and we were talking about writing and stuff. And you said something that I thought was really interesting. You said that every artist comes to a place where they stop and they ask themselves what they really like and what they really want to write, or maybe like if any kind of artist, like whatever art you make. And
yeah,
like maybe this is like right at the edge of burnout, like when that happens. And
yeah,
you might be like one record or book away from like the thing that like really works for you. And then they finally ask themselves these like hard questions and make a piece of art that's really true to themselves, but also just like is a good piece of art. So you had said you kind of asked yourself that question before you wrote Via Negativa, and I know that I think you had told me before that it started out as one project and then it turned into what it is, but it had been like kind of like a different novel.
Yeah.
When you asked yourself what you really like, how did you answer yourself?
Yeah, I think I wanted animals in it because I
Okay.
love animals. So I wanted some kind of weird animal. I wanted some kind of like theological stuff and kind of Catholic arcana in it.
Yeah.
And I really started realizing like I really like first person narrators because
Yeah.
the engine of storytelling can happen in their voice.
Yeah.
Like what they tell you, what they don't tell you. And like you can do that with third person, but it's much more direct. Like you start to wonder, why are they telling me this? Who is telling me this? In a way that it's not quite as not as in high relief. If you try it with the third person. So some of those things I kind of wanted. And I also love road novels. Like I love Charles Portis, especially.
Yeah. You recommended Dog of the South to me.
Yeah.
And like that, I think that was kind of an influence on Via Negativa. And that's like such an amazing, I see a lot of Portis in your writing. It's amazing stuff.
Portis like worked at the newspaper here, the Commercial Appeal, I think, in Memphis, where I live. He's from Arkansas, and I don't know, living here, it's like you can totally just like you live inside a Portis book, essentially, like the way people talk, how much just pure information they tell you.
Yeah, and Dog of the South is in first person as well, and that narrator is just like kind of unbelievable. Yeah. And there's something amazing about I feel like a first person narrator. Like you can get into the question of like, well, is this narrator reliable? You can kind of like get into different, I don't know, questions about it that you might not be able to get into with third person. I feel like I read somewhere that Jonathan Franzen told writers that they shouldn't write in the first person unless they like really like think it's going to work. But I don't know. I kind of feel like that's not good advice. But
yeah, I think
what do I know?
When I think there's a big kind of third person cult. Just in contemporary fiction, but I like first person. I mean, you just find what works for you and then tease it out. You know what I mean? It's like a piano isn't better than a guitar as a songwriting thing. You just kind of like develop skills on one, and the theory is the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I can't imagine.
Better at.
I can't. Right. Yeah. Like I can't imagine Via Negativa in third person. I think it's just sort of like what works for the project at hand, essentially. I think we're like, I don't know, we started a little bit late, but do we still have a little bit of time, I think, to talk more, or should we jump to the Q&A?
Yeah, we're good. You still have a little bit more time.
Okay, cool. I kind of want to have you read one more thing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to decide whether it should be the part about deserts or mazes, or if it should be about Dan's the part about Dan's like awakening as a priest. Which one?
I would do the mazes. That sounds fun to me.
Okay, that's on.
You know what page that's on?
Yeah, it's 173. It's a little one, but I love that one. So I think it's it's like the second paragraph, starting with the cemetery was a maze, and then it go to the next page at the end of that paragraph.
So he's talking about the cemetery where his friend is buried. The cemetery was a maze, which suited Paul. He had a theory that the world could be divided into two categories. There were labyrinths and there were deserts, and that was about it. The moon, he said, was a desert. The internet was a labyrinth. America was a desert generally. Books were, for the most part, labyrinths, except for 2, maybe 3 books of poetry that were deserts. What about the sea, I asked. A desert, easily. A desert of water? If you could drink sand, would a desert still be a desert? What about people? Labyrinths, mazes of veins, nerves, intestines. The brain is a labyrinth. The heart is a labyrinth. The two of us made a real labyrinth once to prepare our parishes and, perhaps more selfishly, ourselves for Lent. We made two, actually, one for each of our churches. I copied the design from a library book and made a transparency, which we traced onto two big burlap sheets that took up most of the narthex. Once they dried, we gave them a test run, each of us walking through his own painted maze, circling closer and closer to our destinations. By this point, his theory, too dualistic for my tastes, had long been established. When we were done walking the mazes, I asked him what our labyrinths were. Deserts or labyrinths? Deserts, he said, straight-faced, and we rolled up his desert maze and stuck it in his truck.
Yes. I love that passage.
Thanks.
And I think we were talking and one time, and I was like, dude, this is like an kind of like really hits me like a tip of the hat to Jorge Luis Borges and Roberto Bolaño.
Uh-huh.
And I think you were like, yeah, actually that was like kind of the intention.
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly what I was trying to do. Well, because Bolaño will always have characters that have these like really, they'll have like a very cogent seeming theme that's totally actually just falls apart. But there's something kind of beautiful about that sorting or that kind of like strange litany.
Opening page of Woes of the True Policeman for anyone who's interested.
It shows up in the Savage Detectives too. That same thing.
Oh right,
about like poets and queerness and stuff. Yeah. Which just I love. There's something that sings in that.
Yeah.
And I think something about characters with totally not stupid, like kind of poetic but verging on stupid theories. I lap that shit up.
Yeah. Me too. And there's a lot of that. I mean, there's like so many. This is like a really good scene book, just like little moments, like I don't know, like Father Dan in the Cracker Barrel. And he's like talking to this waiter, and the waiter's like telling him this story about like I can't remember now if it was a dream or someone said they had a dream where it was like the singer Carrie Underwood covered in eyes in the ocean. Yeah. Just like, I don't know, really great moments like that I don't know, it's just like everyone just got to read the book, and I don't know, it's just a really earnest, wonderful, like beautifully written book. And everybody, you should all click right down there is the purchase books link. You should purchase that from Mysterious Galaxy and support your indie bookstores. And do we have more?
Galaxy is a really good name for a bookstore selling a book too. You know, it just kind of fits. So
it does. Yeah, I wanna go sometime.
Me too.
Someday on the West Coast.
We'd love to have you guys in person. And if y'all are ready, if you want to move into the Q&A, I saw that there are some questions down there for you.
Oh, cool. Let's do it.
Okay, let me pull this open here. Okay. Let's go right from the top here. Which scene or section brought you the most joy to write, and which one was the most challenging?
Okay. Who's the name? I just want to hear the names of people just for fun.
Does
it say?
I don't know if it says.
No worries.
Constance, do you know if it says? I don't think it does, unfortunately.
I really liked... Let me think here. I had a lot of fun. There's a part where they see a ball of paint, one of the world's largest balls of paint.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted it in there as a kind of freakish attraction. Because there are a couple of these where someone will like paint a baseball and then keep adding more and more paint until it's the size of a sofa.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know why. And then I kind of like, I love it because, you know, if you actually look at them, it's supposed to be a ball, but they wind up looking like weird, like rippling pears.
Yeah.
And I just thought, like, oh, it's like a life, that you apply these little layers every day,
Yeah.
and it becomes this huge, uneven, weird thing,
Yeah. Yep.
And I didn't really understand why I was doing it, but it kind of became clear to me, and I had some delight in the kind of like trying to imagine its topography and what it would be like to make one, and that
Right.
so I don't know. I derived a lot of fun from that particular stop, but really the exchanges and the dialogue. I took some playwriting classes while I was trying to write the book, and figuring out like the game of dialogue was really fun. So anytime I got a chance to kind of, oh, you there?
Oh, yep. Lost your video. There we go.
Anytime I had a chance to kind of do that was really fun for me.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to go to the next question here. So you specifically said that they're let's see. You specifically said these are the kinds of American priests. How are American priests different from European priests?
I can't speak too much to that just because I don't have a lot of experience of it. I'm trying to think like even I don't know that many French or Spanish or, but I would say that, there's a lot of influence of Protestantism here, in a way that definitely affects American priests, like you see just that cultural diffusion that's happened over decades. And so I would guess that it like you see, I don't know, like, for example, my parents occasionally attended this because their friends were in it, this People of Praise group where, people spoke like in tongues and stuff, but it was Catholic. Yeah. And it's like very hard to imagine a Catholic group doing that like in Europe.
Right.
So I think there are a lot of weird little practices like that have been absorbed here, or prosperity gospel stuff.
Yeah.
That's been absorbed here. That's probably what I would guess. Give me 1 second. I'm going to grab a charger just so this doesn't die.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for bearing with me.
You're cool.
Okay. I think that should do the trick. Let's flip it. Okay.
Perfect.
Cool.
Okay. So a couple more questions here. How long did it take to write Via Negativa from the first spark of an idea to the final form? Has the story stayed the same for the most part or drastically changed?
Yeah, I think it's kept its core, but some of the plot elements changed a lot. I started writing it on index cards. So I have these little kind of modular sections that would be from his point of view. Sometimes they're like mini essays on things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it would just be a little snippet of dialogue. And slowly those coalesced into something. I started entering them on the computer, moving them around, finding ways where they attach to one another. So I would say it probably was like a good 2 years for the whole thing to really be what it is now. Mm-hmm. My agent helped me a little bit sculpting like some of the, I think, emotional core with his friend Paul. Mm-hmm. An agent I was talking to but didn't ultimately go with. She helped me a lot with some of the Bruno stuff, kind of invited those ideas where there was this abusive priest, but he didn't really exist in the present.
Oh,
and
okay.
Yeah, so I always had this kind of narrator in denial, but the stakes kept getting higher and higher as I drafted it, just to like keep a reader there,
Yeah.
So it was less retrospective and more kind of active.
Right. Okay.
But then, once it was there's like little things as it's being edited down the road. My editor at Knopf she's amazing. And she, why don't we put this there? Why don't we add a little scene there?
Yeah.
And so she kind of, gave me the last kind of bigger edit.
Yeah.
But I would say about 2 years and change, and while working on some other stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, last one, and this one does have a name, and it's my wife, Stephanie, asking this question.
Hi, Stephanie.
So Stephanie asks, what what was your thought process when choosing your protagonist's name? Is Father Dan like who you imagine you might have grown into had you become a priest?
Yeah. There are a couple reasons for it. I like, there are a lot of traditions, like people, like Pseudo Dionysus, the Areopagite, he's still the name of this apostle or kind of apostle. Dante is the pilgrim and the poet, and I kind of like, and that's kind of, the Divine Comedy is a weird little, has the Via Negativa kind of baked into it too. And so there are a lot of people working in those traditions that play with the notion of like authorship and creation that I really like. It also, there's a lot of stuff with autofiction, which is like, muddying the line between the narrator or the subject and the writer. And I thought it was kind of funny to do that, except that the narrator is a priest and he's like twice my age and change.
Right.
So, and then, just on a textural level, like there are a lot of priests of that background named Dan. So it's kind of a game, and then it became something else. At first, it let me just write like, oh, here are things that I think. And it let me kind of get in his skin in a very cheap way. But then it kind of worked, and it worked in these other ways that kind of bloomed as I was writing. So, yeah, I mean, there are a couple reasons for it, and they wound up kind of adding up into something greater than a joke. You know what I mean?
You're from Muncie, right?
Yeah.
And then he's from Muncie, or was
from Indiana. He was there for a long time. Yeah.
He was at a parish in Muncie, and so like there's a lot of similar ground
some
there.
Overlap. Yeah. And he kind of fits nicely into like, he could have been born in my parents' families or my wife's, mom's family or something pretty easily. So it just kind of, I like that as a kind of game,
Yeah, me too.
So that's kind of what I was thinking.
Awesome.
Is that it for the questions?
That's all the questions I have here, unless anyone wants to... Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. There's another one. Let me see.
Okay.
Is there a longer history that you made for somewhat more minor characters, specifically the Art Garfunkel kid from Indiana?
Oh, yeah. There's like a kid that comes to a seminary and brings mushrooms and weed.
Oh, yeah,
when
that
they're
guy.
In the minor seminary.
Yeah,
I mean, some of, like the book fluctuates in the process of writing it. There's probably, another 40 or 50 pages that could have gone in there. So some of it, like there were parts with Dan, the narrator, Dan's siblings that were more present in previous versions. And like in my mind, he has like a brother who was a victim of the AIDS crisis, and stuff like that. That just there was so much backstory that it kind of bogged down that I need to really pick and make it all. I wanted to have his backstory contribute to the plot in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to illuminate each other, especially since there was so much of it. I needed his past to charge the present. So stuff like that, I think. Yeah, I kind of can imagine like Anna, who he meets in Kansas, a teen, a kind of like pyromaniac teen. Those I feel like they do have a little more to them. And they've come into like Anna was actually in the first version of Via Negativa before Dan was, in a way. There was a different thing with a bottomless pit and stuff like that.
Interesting. Yeah, and her friend has an interesting little side story, like the guy who is playing the chess when like he's doing the cleaning job. There's like a lot of little moments like that are really great. Yeah, and you've got to pick and choose which ones you include.
I stole that from my friend in high school who played chess with some person. He worked in a cleaning service in an office, and he started playing this like weeks long game of chess with a stranger he'd never met, just by
That's
he's
amazing.
cleaning the office, he'd move a pawn, and
That's amazing. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Was that all the questions?
I think so.
Oh, cool.
Constance, are we out of time, or are we? Oh, hey.
We are getting close to it.
Okay.
So that brings me back on to also ask my final question for the two of you, and that is, what are you currently working on, and is there anything that you would like to share with the readers for anything they should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, Jared, take it away.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm working on a novel. It's getting close to being done, and Dan was one of my beta readers for it, and like a big, I don't know, helper, kind of shoulder to cry on sort of advisor as I've worked my way through it. So I'm like getting ready to kind of try to figure out how to publish it. And then that's kind of like my big thing I'm working. Yeah, it's sort of like a meeting place between DIY touring musicians and Nazi occultists and vortexes in Sedona, Arizona. So these three kind of totally unlikely things you wouldn't imagine would somehow coalesce, and they do. And it's this weird sort of literary fiction with a bit of sci-fi weirdness and like a lot of music references. And yeah,
it's really good. I read it. It was chunky when I read it, and I think I wolfed it down in like a week. It was amazing. So
thanks, man.
It took a couple days and just like got sucked in. So
thanks, dude.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. And it's tentatively titled Attack Decay, right?
Yep. Yes, it is. And Dan is working on a few different things. Do you want to? I know.
Sure. Yeah, I've got one
things.
that has like a tech startup and vampires and punk bands. So Jared and I have some overlap there. And then another thing that is set in the 14th century and has kind of plant people in it. So people that are kind of part plants, and looks at like chivalry and kind of plays with stuff that gets lumped into like the Green Man in that myth. So yeah, those are a couple things I'm kicking around. So yeah.
Well, all of those sound incredibly awesome. So everyone stay tuned, because I'm sure once you finish Via Negativa, you're going to be ready for some more good reads. So I want to thank Dan, and I also want to thank Jared so much for joining us. Before I forget, also, is there any, what's the best way for people to stay up to date with what you have going on? If you have a website, if there's so many different forms of communication, whatever your preferred method of staying in touch with people is.
If you just punch my name in on Twitter or Instagram, you can find me there. That's usually where I'll post stuff.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Jared, what about you?
Me. Okay, me too. Yeah, just my website. Just, my name, jaredbartman.com. And then I have an Instagram as well. Either of those places. Yep.
Perfect, because we are a society ruled by social media.
Yes.
But I want to thank you so much to Jared for being our fabulous moderator with amazing questions.
Yeah,
and
thank you, Jared.
And a huge thank you to Dan for, one, writing an amazing book, and two, for sharing it with us and hopping on tonight and celebrating it with us. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you,
and
Constance. Thank you, Mysterious Galaxy. And
buy it from Mysterious Galaxy if you don't have it yet.
The pointy section.
Buy it.
Pointy section. The
purchase books.
And it'll be right down there for you.
And it's really beautiful and hardcover, and then a new paperback version that's also super beautiful and has a different cover. So you should collect them both.
There you go.
Pokemon, collect them all.
Gotta catch them all. And the audiobook version, why not?
Just get it in all formats. Each one has different Easter eggs and secrets to unfold.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Yeah. And if you get them all, there's actually a treasure map that is included. So you need all four to find my my pile of gold. So do that. And
his social security number.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if that isn't motivation, I don't know what else is. So, so on that note, we will say thank you so much to everyone. We will see you all next time and have a lovely rest of your evening. Goodbye, Dan. Goodbye, Jared.
Thanks
Bye,
again.
everyone.
Yes, Constance. Thank you.